Michael, thanks for joining us here on the show. How are you doing?
Who is this? How did you get this number?
We just
What's
typed in
going on?
we just typed in Slipcase on Skype and called.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yes.
it probably won't bring up too many. If you actually, I don't think I'm registered as Slipcase on there. I probably should be, I guess.
Yeah.
Uh,
So has
I had-
anybody outside of that community ever addressed you as such, like in formal life?
it's funny. Not outside of the community, no, because they really wouldn't know. But whenever I would go to conventions for the longest time, it was, "Are you Slippy?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." So I mean, it got around. Not as much now, but it seems to be making a comeback, I guess.
There you go.
Have you ever had any awkward moments with that, like be at a formal dinner and someone yells across the room, "Slippy"?
Well, first of all, I'm never at a formal dinner.
Okay.
I don't do a lot of tuxedo and black tie events, and I'm never like, "Oh, this is a very fine leg of lamb we're having here, isn't it, darling?" "Oh, yes, it is. It certainly is." "Hey, Slippy!" "Oh dear. No, don't pay any attention to that person. He doesn't know what we're talking about." No, the most formal dinner you'll find from me is like maybe if I'm at a breakfast buffet one morning. Then that's about as formal as it gets, and that's about as informal as it really does get. So the idea of me at a formal dinner is actually it's quite amusing to me. I wouldn't know what to do with myself in a situation like that.
Yeah, I think most of us are like that. Um,
Yeah.
so what I want to start with is kind of a question we ask pretty much all our guests. What are your memories of watching movies as a kid?
Well, there's a lot of memories I have of watching movies as a kid. I mean, that was a big thing of my childhood. My dad was a big movie fan, so he brought me into the movie fold very early on. So I don't have any memories where I wasn't watching movies and was watching movies that were out at the time. And then my dad would show me, if I fell in love with something like Raiders of the Lost Ark, he would say, "Well, that's great, but I want you to watch this movie I grew up with called The African Queen." And I'd be like, "Oh, okay." And I would develop an appreciation for what came before, and I really owe him a lot for that. And so, I loved everything. I mean, it was just. And then horror really became a part of my life in the mid 80s when I was pretty young, like 11, 12 years old. And Creepshow and Dawn of the Dead kind of broke that open for me big time. And then I just became a lifelong horror fanatic. But I still love every type of movie that there is. I don't have any. I find, if anything, my horizons have somewhat broadened in recent years. Not that they weren't really already, but I find myself leaning towards dramas and documentaries and that sort of thing. Even though I make documentaries for a living, I still like to watch other people do it.
Right, right. Can you pinpoint a time when that love developed into more to where you were appreciating the craft of the movie making?
Oh, yeah,
or wanted to
absolutely.
desire it?
As a matter of fact, yes, I can. There are two instances I can think of. One when it's going to sound laughable. I was 8 years old. I went to see Raiders of the Lost Ark for the first time. I didn't want to see that movie because it didn't have lasers and spaceships in it. And I'm like, "Well, what the hell is this?" My dad's like, "Well, this reminds me a lot of the movies that I went to see when I was a kid, and I think you're really going to dig it." And I'm like, "Okay." And it's from the same people who did Close Encounters and Star Wars. I'm like, "All right." And I saw the poster. I was living in California, La Mirada, California at the time, and we went to the La Mirada Mall, which is long since gone. And we went to see it in one of their big 70 millimeter houses that they had just built. They had two 70 millimeter houses at the mall. I'm walking by the poster, and it's just this guy standing there with a bullwhip, and there's no spaceships, no lasers. I'm like, "Oh man, I don't want to." We go in the movie, and I'm transformed by the halfway part. I'm just like, "What is this?" And that's when I remember very vividly starting to look at what's a director of photography. What is that? What does an editor do? What do these people do? And so that was, I would say, when the filmmaker switch kind of first got flipped on for me, even though I couldn't really put it into words. I was 8 years old. I don't want to make it sound like suddenly I'm like, you know, thinking about mise en scène and stuff like that. I mean, I was like, what is this? And then when I got into horror and I discovered Creepshow and then Dawn of the Dead, the works of George Romero, where I realized, oh, he's given us the gore and the fun and the roller coaster ride, but there's also something else going on here. There's an attention to character and the social commentary and the just the sort of world building that he was so really capable of doing that I wasn't. Suddenly I forgot about the zombies and the other stuff, and I was there for the characters and what other stuff he was throwing down. So that was like it was like a 1-2 punch for me. And although the Dawn of the Dead stuff came a little bit later, so I would say those two were sort of seminal events for me in terms of shaping film from being an entertainment, something to do for a laugh on a Saturday afternoon, something that I wanted to gobble up as much as I could because just to learn about the craft.
Right. Um, I think I've heard you talk about this on the Dead Pit show. When you started working for Anchor Bay, it kind of started with, was it an unofficial type of website you kind of put together?
Yeah, back in '98, late 1997, I had a website called Widescreen Central already, which was dedicated to talking about widescreen movies that were on VHS. Because I was really big into the proper aspect ratios and making sure that people saw movies the way they were supposed to be seen. And Laserdisc had adopted the widescreen format very early on because it was really more of a collector's format. But VHS was very slow because that was much more of a mainstream mom and pop, family friendly format. And it was very slow to adopt widescreen movies on VHS. So I started a website that would promote when they would do that. And they started doing more and more of that as they went along. And one of the companies that was starting to do a lot of great cult movies that I loved was this company called Anchor Bay, which I'd never heard of before. Found out later they were kind of born from the ashes of Video Treasures and Star Maker and all these other kind of EP budget companies. And then someone was taking that catalog that they now had access to and were doing VHS reissues of movies like Maniac and Dawn of the Dead and Halloween. And it's like, what the hell's going on here? And then I started calling the company and said, what do you got coming out? What's going on? And then I did an unofficial website for it because this is bad. It's hard for people to imagine this, but this was back in the days when a lot of companies didn't have websites.
Right.
They didn't know they understood what the internet was, but they didn't know how to monetize it or deal with it or what to do with it. It was a sort of separate thing. So I registered at anchorbayentertainment.com and put the whole catalog online for people to see and did, what was coming up, what was what was rumored and stuff like that. And one thing led to another, and eventually a gentleman by the name of Jay Douglas, who was the VP of acquisitions for Anchor Bay Entertainment, took a shine to me for some reason, and he became a big proponent of mine. So when the time came for Anchor Bay to say, hey, we need to do our own website, he said, hire this guy. And I left Charlotte, North Carolina in July of 2000 to come up here to Michigan, where they were headquartered. And I started working for them. So it was a weird, long, twisted process, but it all ended up working out pretty good.
Yeah. Was that your, pretty much only job starting out with them, or did you do other things as well?
Oh, well, let's see. When that happened, I was already 27. So between the ages of 18 and 27, I did a bunch of different jobs. Only one of, there was one I really liked, was working for a company called Major Video Concepts, which was a videotape distributor. They were the ones that would send out all the tapes to all the video store chains, all the mom and pops and all. And so I was in charge of their posters and their POP. So all the displays and posters that would come in, I was in charge of making sure those went out to the customers. I eventually ended up handling will call all the customers that came to the branch to pick up stuff. I was like a pig in shit because I was getting all the videotapes and everything. It was really that I enjoyed that job. I had that job for about 3 years. Eventually, the changing fortunes of the video industry came along and the branch closed down. But there were other jobs I had. Movie theater, worked at a movie theater, worked at a video store, worked at a photo finishing plant where, back in the day when you would go to Kmart or Sears and get family portraits taken, they would send those rolls of film to this place to get developed. And your job was to, in the dark, load this film into canisters that would then be shipped out to the photo machines to get developed. I had that job for about 3 months before I just said fuck it and left. I had a lot of jobs where I just said fuck it and left. I worked for Diamond Comic Distributors for 4 hours. I went. There was a local branch in Charlotte. I went there and I was on the line, the shipping line, just packing comics into boxes. And the people around me were so into comics and were so annoying that I went to lunch. And I remember I was at a media play down the street. They had just opened. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, I guess it's time to head back to work. No.
Out
No.
of sheer nerdy annoyance.
It was. I mean, it wasn't the type of thing where, because I wasn't a comic guy, so I really couldn't get into the conversation. But even if I had, I wouldn't have wanted to, because these guys were just being so snotty about oh, I hate that guy. And after about 5 minutes, it's like, this is why fandom sucks sometimes, because they're just annoying assholes that you're having to stand in a big, stupid warehouse that has fluorescent lights beaming down on you all the time. And my feet were hurting, and I was just like, there's no part of this that's worth the money. None. No part of this. So that's one I had. And then I had another job where I duplicated Amway sales videotapes and deer hunting videos at night.
Nice.
No, it wasn't. It was actually quite soul killing, and it was one of the last job I had before I went to work for Anchor Bay. Because that job, I actually quit that job 3 times, but because I worked third shift, the first time I quit because I was just like, I was frustrated with it. I quit at like 2 a.m, went home, and I was like, well, wait a minute. I don't have any other job right now. I don't have any other prospects. So I went back and tore up my resignation at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they never knew I quit. Then
Well,
did it
the
again.
George Costanza there.
It was a little bit of that. It was a little, and then so I quit the second time by sliding the resignation out of my boss's door, which was adjacent to the room that I worked in. Once again, 6 o'clock rolls around. I'm back home. I was like, fuck. So I drive back to the office. I had access to the conference room next to his office. I literally lifted out the ceiling tile, hoisted myself. This is back when I didn't weigh as much as I do now. I hoisted myself back up into the ceiling, pulled the ceiling tile out of his office, dropped down, like Mission Impossible type shit. And the whole time I'm doing this, I'm just like, I don't even want this fucking job. And then, I saved that. And then the third time I quit was when, the final time I quit was when I got a job in. A lot of the time I would go in there and have nothing to do. I would just sit there for like 7, 8 hours doing nothing. And we came in, there was one job to do. It was a 500-piece job, very quick, called video. It was Home Fires Burning. And I was like, okay. So I put the master and I fast forward to the end to see how long it is. And as I'm fast forwarding, I can see it on the monitor going by. And all it is a roaring fireplace. And I'm like, okay, it's one of those stupid video fireplace jobs. These are the dumbest damn things. But whatever, I don't care. I get to the end of it. It goes dark. And up comes a directing and editing credit. And I just stop it and I went, okay, editing. You turn the camera on, and then 30 minutes later, you turned it off. That is not in any way editing. That is just... And then directing. Well, was there some guy behind the camera going, okay, fire, I need you to project heat. Make me feel hot. No. And so that literally, I stopped the tape. I took my badge off. I wrote I quit. I left it on and I never came back. I just said, I cannot participate in this madness any longer. So that was the last time I was there. I went back to that place 3 years ago. I was passing down there, and a friend of mine who I hadn't seen in years was still working there. And the whole area where I used to work is now abandoned. So he walked me through where it was. It was so fucking creepy. Because it's like I hadn't been there like almost 20 years. And the last time I was there, it was like, fuck you. And it's like, oh, this place is dead and buried and nothing of any value happens here. Good.
That's exactly what needs to happen.
Yeah. So
I'd like to encourage our listeners, though, if you ever run into Mr. Felsher at like a con or in public, get him to sign like a fireplace DVD or a hunting video as a unique memento.
Well, I can tell you exactly. I'll sign if it's called Home Fires Burning. I'll sign it, and if it's a Night and Hail series deer hunting video, I can probably sign it because I probably duplicated it because we had that contract. So if it's Night and Hail, I can tell you all sorts of stuff about the various types of deer urine to use for hunting. Not because I want to know, but because I was forced to know. It was very upsetting.
I am currently on eBay.
Yeah, I'm sure it's out there.
Oh, there it is. 4-pack right here.
I did and then Amway sales presentations for the man who owned the company, or the people who owned the company that I did this for were Amway distributors. And they would do all their sales tapes and everything. And that's when I learned wow, this is where the scam is. Only people making the millions of dollars in Amway are not the people selling the products, but the dream of selling the products, the videotapes, the books, the sales presentations. Those are the guys making the money.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only way you're ever going to make the money like that.
Oh, absolutely.
And so once you realize that, and because you watch these tapes and you're like, they're worthless. They're not telling you anything. They keep telling you, here comes the secret. Here comes the secret. Well, the secret's in the next tape. And it's like, oh, okay. Meanwhile, these worthless 12-minute, 15-minute videos we're doing are costing people like $30 a pop.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, what a scam. What a fucking scam. I should have thought of this.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, I think I saw where you had said before that your first kind of video project was an interview with Linnea Quigley for a Night of the Demons feature. Is that correct?
It was. Yeah, I did on my own. She happened to be nearby at a convention here in Cleveland. It was a couple hours from Detroit. And I wanted to start doing the featurettes and the interviews and stuff. And I contacted her on my own. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to go do this. I'm going to edit it. I'm going to put it together and present it to Anchor Bay and say, hey, here's something else I can do. And they liked it, and they ended up on the disc. But the problem is that they already had a great team of people doing it. They didn't need anybody else. So it was cool, but at the same time, it was like, well, I don't really have an in here. And then I think it was less than a year later, I left the company. Because my position just got phased out because it got bought by another company. My position in Anchor Bay was always very strange because I did a lot of different things that would normally be in other departments. And then of course, I get a phone call from nobody I give a fuck about. What I would do is I would get, I would be in charge of the release schedule, answering the emails, the website. I worked in acquisitions. I helped with graphics a little bit. I helped with marketing. I went to conventions to represent the company. As this other company took over, little by little, all those responsibilities started getting reassigned to the departments they normally would have been a part in to begin with. And the last 6 months that I was there, I hardly did anything. I just kind of sat there. So when I got laid off, and I wasn't fired, my position was phased out. It really wasn't a surprise to me, and so it was like, okay, so maybe time for the bird to get kicked out of the nest, and that's when I decided to devote time to Red Shirt Pictures full time, and that was in April of 2005, a little over 15 years ago now.
I do want to say it's a shame what happened with Anchor Bay because I used to buy stuff predicated solely on that little sailboat.
Yeah, I heard that from a lot of people, and look, the company, you have to evolve in this business to a certain degree. You can't just stay the same, and other people had different visions for the company, and they did a lot of great work after I was gone. It wasn't like I left and then everything went to shit. I was one part of a really talented group of people there. And they did a lot of great stuff after I was gone. But the company shifted its focus away from catalog and towards new stuff. And whether you liked some of that new stuff or not, it just became a very different company. It came to represent something else. And that's fine. It's just the way things went sometimes. And now, unfortunately, the company doesn't exist anymore. But it just became an asset to some people who didn't necessarily see what had built it up to begin with. Right. And it just became a little bit different. But I mean, different's not necessarily bad. And I wouldn't want to, there are a lot of great work happened there after I was gone. So it just, but certainly in the last couple of years, it seemed to, it just really didn't bear much of a resemblance to the company that it used to be. But again, that happens. That's just the way things go.
I feel like it was right around the time they redesigned the logo. That's when it all went to hell.
Well, the logo went through a couple redesigns, but yeah, that little ship in a box at the bottom of the spine. I had more than a few people tell me they took chances on titles because it was an Anchor Bay thing. It's like, well, I liked so much of the other stuff your company brings out. I'll try this. So we exposed people who never heard of Paul Naschy before. It was like, well, I'll try Curse of the Devil or Werewolf Shadow or some of these Italian things that they'd never heard of before. But it's like, well, I bought your Fulci and Argento titles. I'll give Hitchhike a try. So it was really, that was when we were aware we were building a brand that but it was also interesting in that Anchor Bay was such a multifaceted company. We had the horror and the cult stuff, but we were also, I think, one of, if maybe even the leading fitness brand out there with Crunch Fitness and
Oh,
stuff
wow.
like that. We were one of the leaders in the industry, and we also had a huge children's line with Thomas the Tank Engine.
Hmm.
So there was a lot of different facets to that company other than the cult and the horror stuff. So it was always interesting to me just how really bizarre and sort of uh, segregated the divisions were at times, and some of the departments, and how they would interact very rarely, but then we're all under the same roof. It was a very odd company, which is, I think, probably one of the reasons that I related to it so much. I think that's why later on, when it began to become more of a traditional company, that I wasn't as attracted to it anymore.
When you started your company,
Yeah.
what were some of the important things you learned from Anchor Bay, your time at Anchor Bay, to help you kind of get off on the right foot?
I just learned what people really wanted to see, what people were interested in seeing, and then also the value of good work, of doing something that, and the value of Jay Douglas, the former VP, who was really the guiding vision behind that branch of the company, the cult and horror stuff. I mean, he was really driving that. He said, if it's cool, I want to do it. And that was kind of my thing when I was doing Red Shirt Pictures. It's like, this is an interesting story. I want to tell this story. And the horror genre has a lot of untold stories in it. And it's my love anyway. And I have a foothold in that now because of my time at Anchor Bay. So let's get out there and find those stories that haven't been told yet, and
Right.
really just shine a light on stuff that maybe people have never heard of before. Then again, when you're your own company, you'll take whatever jobs you can get your fucking hands on. But I was lucky in that the jobs I wanted and the jobs that I ended up getting were for things that I really cared about and found value in. There was I was putting one of my earliest gigs was doing the editing on a featurette for Nail Gun Massacre for Synapse Films. Now,
Mm.
Nail Gun Massacre is exactly the movie you think it is when you hear the title. But yeah, is it objectively a good movie? That's up to you to decide. But what I liked about it was that the guy behind it, Terry Lofton, who's no longer alive, hearing him talk about it and what he went through to make the movie, it was like, I gotta applaud this guy. He said, I want to make a movie. And he went out and he fucking made a movie.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of people never do that. They all, oh, I could. He was like, why not? I'll go do it. And he did it. And so it was really cool to be able to bring those stories to light, to help bring those stories out and say, hey, say what you want about the movie. And I like the fact that Terry was also well aware of what movie he had made. He wasn't saying, he was like, I know it's ridiculous. The movie's absurd, but it was fun to make and I got to make it. So it's like, my hat's off to you, dude. So um, that was what I really began to learn. And I learned that at Anchor Bay too. It's just like these people really cared about the stuff that they did.
Right.
And to be able to document that and the processes that they went through back in a time where, you couldn't just grab an iPad and go film a movie if you wanted to. You had to raise money and work on film, which was a very cumbersome thing if you weren't used to it. And, finding editing facilities and telecity and all these processes and all these things you had to go through. It was important for
Yeah.
me to document that stuff. That's what I continued into Red Shirt Pictures doing.
Right. Before I move off of Anchor Bay, Jonathan, do you have any more questions about the Anchor Bay time?
No, that actually answered a lot of stuff I'd always kind of wondered about.
So I wanted to kind of talk to you about something that I don't hear you talk about much in the interviews with Dead Pit or anything, but kind of the process of the producing the special feature.
Mm.
And you've done hours of these features for a number of companies.
Yeah.
How has that process changed over the years, if at all?
It hasn't changed dramatically in terms of the process itself, because you get a job, you gotta find out, okay, who's available, who could potentially talk from this movie, contacting them, hearing back from them, sometimes not hearing back from them, determining then, okay, well, we've got, out of the wide net of people I casted, I only got 4 out of the 10. Or sometimes you get 11 out of 10. I mean, it depends on what the film is. And then deciding, okay, am I going to do a series of short featurettes, or is there enough here to do a comprehensive single making of piece? And then you decide, okay, then you do the interviews. You set up the questions, and you figure out from the footage that you get back, what's the story? Because you can go into it thinking, okay, we'll go from here to here to here, but then you'll hear answers and themes that come up from the various interviews and be like, oh, there's actually another story here, which is about how this guy really had been wanting to do this for years, or how he met this one person and suddenly that changed this whole process, and that's how this movie got made. So you kind of listen to the footage and then shape it that way. Because if you go in with preconceptions as to what it should be early on, and then try to, it's like hammering a square peg into a round hole. At the end of the day, you got to just let the footage kind of determine what it's going to end up being, and then shape it that way. And then put it together, post production, finish it off, and then deliver it. So that process hasn't changed. What has changed a little bit, actually quite a bit, is some of the equipment is a lot less cumbersome and problematic than it was even 15 years ago. Shooting in 4K and HD is for me a breeze without physical. I don't have a tape anymore. You can upload stuff and just it's all non-linear, and it's really. I remember when I first shifted to non-linear format was when we were shooting on Survival of the Dead. It was like, okay, Michael, we're going to shoot. We're not shooting on tapes. We're shooting onto these cards, and then we offload the cards onto hard drives. I'm like, but where is it? If it's not on a tape, I don't understand where it is. It's like, I know this is weird. I don't like this. 1 week later, I'm like, tapes, fuck tapes. I don't screw tapes. Tapes suck. So it was, yeah. It's so that's changed, and then also the method of being able to communicate with people has really changed a lot in the 15 years. Trying to track people down, infinitely more easy now than it was 15 years ago. Because a lot of people who you're looking for, who they may not be in the business anymore, are on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, or they have a social profile out there somewhere. Whereas 15 years ago, who the hell knows where they are and how. And then there's a network of people out there that can help you find stuff. So that has improved dramatically over the years. So the ability to get information is certainly a lot better and a lot more productive than it was just even. I would say even 5 years ago, it's gotten a lot better. But certainly compared to where I started out at, like I said, when I started Anchor Bay, I was only 5 years out from a company that didn't even have a website, because they didn't think it was of any value. So it's amazing how quickly things change. I mean, you think it's 20 years since it's now 20 years since I started at Anchor Bay. That's a long time, but it's also not that long a time in terms of all the technological achievement that has happened in that 20 years. Just the way we run our lives is so dramatically different than it was 20 years ago. So I would say that those are the things that are different than when I first started. But again, the process itself is largely the same. I wouldn't say that it's changed all that much.
That's interesting. You were talking about the interviews kind of dictating the story that you tell, because I kind of wondered if you had like an outline or framework beforehand, or
you do. Yeah, you do, based on everything that you know about it going in. Sometimes you know a project very well going into it. It was a film that you were familiar with. You had read the Fangoria articles when it was coming out, or so you knew enough about it. Like with Creepshow, when I went into Creepshow, I knew a lot going in.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you don't want to narrow your focus to just what you know about it. You want to when you do the questions, you try to be general to a certain degree and cast a very wide net on the questions so that it'll key off other memories that these people have. And sometimes what I like to do is save some of the bigger interviews for later, because I know that the director is going to have a lot to say. But what I can get is from members of the crew and the other people, oh, I remember one day this happened and this happened, make a note of that so that I can ask the director, and then that'll key off a whole bunch of other things.
Right.
So you when you're asking questions, there tends to be a boilerplate nature to some of it. But what's really important, and a lot of interviewers don't do this, is that when they're asking a question, they'll have a piece of paper or a note in front of them saying, ask them this question. They're not listening to the answer. They're just waiting for the person to talk so they can go to the next question.
Yeah.
The problem is if you listen to their answer, sometimes they've answered in that answer 2 other questions you have yet to ask.
Yeah.
or they've changed their answer has shifted the nature of a question coming up. So you need to be able to respond to on the fly. Oh, okay. Well, that answers this question, but then that means that this wouldn't have happened that way. So I need to rephrase that accordingly, or ask something that's related to it that's different than this. And I've hired some people in the past who were just to interview who just went off the paper and weren't listening to what the other person was saying. And so they would ask, "Oh, I already asked you that question," and stuff like that. So it's like you need to you need to be less concerned about making sure that the camera's running and stuff like that, but really paying attention to who you're talking to and making sure that you're adjusting on the fly where need be, because that's difficult.
Yeah, and I'm doing that right now.
Exactly. It's like, say, for example, if I'm just answering a question of yours and it's like, yeah, no, you adjust accordingly and you talk to certain people, and sometimes people don't have their pants on, but then that's okay. And then you're going to be like, wait a minute, what? Yeah,
Go
so
back to the pants thing.
you said so that's, and I swear some people do stuff like that to see if the other person's paying attention or not.
Right.
Because then they'll be like, oh yeah, he's not even listening to me. He's just waiting for me to finish so he can get to the next question. And I really try not to have, if at all possible, the sheet of questions in my hand in front of them when I'm talking to them. If I'm the one conducting the interview, I'll have it by my side, but I'll know more often than not what those questions are. And every now and then between questions, I'll just go, okay, we got that. Oh, that's right. And then I'll put it down, because it forms a barrier between me and the person. If I'm here like this going, so what did you do on that movie? It's like, okay, they're not really engaged by it. So that's just little things you pick up over the years. I'm not saying that this is not revolutionary shit I'm talking about, but it's little things that I've found have helped over the years, especially if you're interviewing someone who you've not really worked with yet before or had a lot of communication with.
Right.
Before we move on from this question, you'd actually mentioned Creepshow, how familiar you were with that. And you did an excellent documentary called Just Desserts.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Loved it, by the way. I did have a question. Why was that? Was there an issue with the rights with that not being able to be available in the Scream Factory release? Because I think it would have been a perfect companion.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The reason that it wasn't on the screen, there were a couple reasons for that. One, they talked to me about it and they said, well, the financials just didn't make any sense because they really weren't going to be offering. It would have been a finished disc in the package, and quite frankly, what they were offering just didn't make sense financially to do it. No, I mean I understood why, because it was a big package for them anyway, so they only had so much money left over. And then also it was like, it's been out there for a while now. People want it, they can buy it. I'd rather put new stuff into your set rather than potentially including a documentary that a lot of people probably already have. So it was like, it was sort of you damned if you do, damned if you don't. And so we decided, well, let's not spend the money on including a disc that people can go out and buy on their own if they want, or may already have. Let's put new content on this that I didn't get to do before. And so that's the direction we ended up going. So there were a lot of factors involved in that, but we decided that pretty early on, just to let the documentary be its own thing, and we'll just fill this, because it was a huge set. It had a lot of stuff in it already, and let's just pack it full of stuff that I didn't get to do when I did the documentary.
Yeah. That's probably my favorite release from them. It's by far the most packed.
It's a good one. I think after that one was over, it's just like, you know what? I'm going to retire from the Creepshow Blu-ray business now, because I've done as much as I think I could possibly do. Let somebody else take a crack at it next time. And it's like, you do tend to get a little protective of the movies that you work on sometimes. It's like, well, if you're going to do a thing about Creepshow, you better go to Felsher. It's like, well, I don't want anyone to think that I'm not the owner of the movie. I'm not a part of that movie. Right. I mean, it's been a huge part of my life since I was like 10 years old. And it's had an effect on me in many different ways. And I certainly feel like I've contributed to the documentation of how it was created, but it's still not my movie. So I don't like to be like, nobody else can work on that but me, because that's bullshit. So at the end of the day, I look forward to seeing whenever the inevitable 4K release of it comes out. If anyone wants to do something new, knock yourselves out, because I think I've had my say on the first Creepshow. Been very lucky in that regard. So
you make a good point about why that probably wasn't in that release, and I'm assuming that maybe that's why similar reason why Crystal Lake Memories wasn't a part of the Friday box set.
Yeah, I can't speak to because I know the guys that did that. And
Yeah.
I was familiar with that, but I think it might have been a similar situation.
Right.
Because also with that, it was like they're doing all the movies in one set. It's just huge financial
Yeah.
undertaking. And Crystal Lake Memories has been out now for a few years, so
Sure.
it's like, do you really want to shove something in there that most diehard kind of set already have, or do you want to make this set unique to itself with new stuff that can be done that supplement what was done in Crystal Lake Memories? So
Right. Yeah.
again, I can't speak to what, but I would imagine that there were a lot of the same issues and questions that came up with Just Desserts as well.
Right. Um, Obviously everything is different time wise, but what's kind of the typical time frame you have when you're given a project to finish it from start to finish?
It varies greatly. It depends on how soon did they acquire a title, when they want to schedule it. Because sometimes with certain companies, they acquire something and they want it out within 3 or 4 months, 5, 6 months of when they bought it. Because they don't want to waste time in the license, or it's a situation where we got lucky and we have the elements right on hand. We were able to do a new transfer, and we got it in April. We want to have it out for Halloween. So then it comes down to me, and my window will be shorter because I usually don't get started right when they first acquire a title, and then I need to have it done a couple months before because it has to go into production and distribution. So anywhere from 3 to 4 months to 5 months
Okay.
for an average title, I would say. Although I'm working on a couple right now where I'm going to have almost 9 to 10 months lead time.
And what would those be, by the way?
Those are Aaron's. Isn't.
That was pretty convincing.
And there's also ARP already 7 twice.
You heard it here, folks. Breaking.
Yeah.
No, so those are because the company that's I'm working with in that particular situation has such a long slate coming up that these are way at the end, and they closed the deal a long time ago. So I was like, well, here we don't need them right away, but if you want to start work on them, that's great because sometimes more time does help. Other times it doesn't.
Would you say that adds to what they can do with a certain release? Because, especially, the collector's editions are kind of all over the board, right? You might have one that's just packed. You got a full-length documentary. You have supplemental features. And sometimes you get some stuff that's got a couple featurettes and a new audio commentary.
Yeah, you never know going in. You think I've had situations. I had 2 projects recently for Vestron's Shivers and Little Monsters.
Mhm.
And going in, I thought for sure that Shivers would be the easiest of the 2.
Mhm.
And then I really probably wouldn't get much for Little Monsters because I knew that had been a problematic production. It had been difficult, and it didn't get much of a release, and it got caught up in a bankruptcy. And I thought, I don't know if that one I'm going to get a lot of. And also, that had big people in it, and I'm like, I don't know. Shivers ended up being pretty good, and I got new Cronenberg. My friend Chris Alexander got a new commentary with David Cronenberg for it, and it was good. It was very solid. I'm very happy with it. But Little Monsters, I ended up getting a shit ton of stuff for, and I wasn't really expecting that, but I was very happy about it. But you just, so you just have to kind of coordinate. It's like, well, suddenly now I have to shift a little bit more attention to Little Monsters because I didn't expect to have all this archival material. I didn't expect Howie Mandel to say yes to an interview.
That shocked me when I saw it.
A lot of people were surprised by that because, I wasn't sure, A, if it was something he wanted to talk about, B, with his well-known OCD and his germophobia issues, does he like doing interviews very much? Is it one less thing that he doesn't want to have to fuck with? But my producer on that, Melanie, she got it done. She called him up, and it was a remarkably easy process. Oh yeah, he'll do it. And then they figured out when to do it, and he was incredibly entertaining and told some really good stories. And so it's just like, great. And he's the one I would have wanted to hear the most from anyway.
Yeah.
So it all
absolutely.
Yeah, but on those 2 projects, because of delays in the Vestron line, it was like a year and a half. And ultimately, though, it was too long because at some point you run out of things to get. Just at some point, it's like we've gotten all the people we can get, so that now it's just going to sit here. So actually, if anything, I prefer a little less time than a little more time because it forces you to get the shit done and be done with it. And sometimes if you wait a little bit more, maybe you can get somebody else. Other times, no, it doesn't make any difference at all. So give me a little less. I'd rather have more money and less time than anything else. But I never get the more money. Never.
Now, is that before we leave this subject? I've kind of always wondered this: do some of these people agree to be interviewed, or in exchange for payment, or is this always like a yeah, we'll do it, and it'll just kind of help boost
It's both.
who we are? Really,
it's both. Some people never ask for money, would never occur to them to ask for money. And then some people, it's primarily about that. And you would not be able to predict really who those people are going to be. You would think that the people who would ask for money are the big stars, or the people who, have had this is not something, I'm a busy person. I need to be compensated for this. But like the big people in the genre I've worked with, like Bruce Campbell, Robert Englund, they never asked me for a dime.
Well, that's pretty cool.
And they're really good. They're just happy to talk about their work and promote it and whatever. And then there's some people who did one film 20 years ago and dropped out and never really had a career again after that. And they're the ones asking for thousands of dollars. Wow. You never know who it's going to be. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't be compensated for their time.
No.
It's not my job to, but it's incumbent upon them to tell me what they think they're worth. And at the end of the day, if I think that there's money in the budget and this is an important enough interview, and the distributor thinks it's an important enough interview, then maybe we can work something out. Other times I've had to go back and say, no, I'm sorry. It's not that I don't want to pay you. It's just that we don't have the money for it. And then they sometimes go, oh, okay, well, fine, whatever, we'll do it. Or they say, okay, sorry, no thanks. And no harm, no foul.
Yeah.
I don't. Everybody, and I understand it certainly from actors who, one actor in particular told me, he said, look, Michael, I'm happy to do the interview, but I haven't gotten any money off this movie in 30 years because it was a deal we signed back in the day when none of us thought these movies were going to stick around. And now it's out there making money for everybody except the people who made it. So if I'm going to participate in this, I have to see something out of it, because otherwise, what am I doing? And it's like, you know what? That's a completely fair point. And in situations like that, I almost always find a way to make it work, because it's like, yeah, why should you do anything? But then there's other people who are like, I don't care. It wasn't important enough to them, or they had moved on and their whole life was different now, or they still had a financial interest in the movie. And so it's like, well, I'm getting paid because this is coming back out on Blu-ray or DVD again. Yeah. So that's where I'll see my money from. So there's not one easy answer for that. But sometimes there's money involved and a lot of times there isn't.
Interesting.
For example, like on this interview, I'm getting paid, which I thought was nice of you guys to offer me that.
It was. Well, we recently signed a deal with Spotify for a little bit less than what Joe Rogan got. So,
okay, good.
We're spreading it out there,
And I don't need Joe Rogan money. I'll take half of that. That's fine.
Oh, you're worth more than that, man.
Good. Yeah, well, look, I'm not going to be greedy. So, just PayPal it to me at the end of the session. I appreciate it.
You got it. Check your Venmo. Just check Venmo.
Venmo's fine too. I'm not specific.
Can you think of a title that you worked on in the past that just went so smooth you could hardly believe how easy things were going?
Oh, God. There have been a few like that. Most of them are like that, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't think there are always titles that are ones that are just, you want to, club your brains out and just be like, I'm done with this business. I never want to work in this again. Because it's just like one that was recently was very difficult was Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. And it had almost nothing to do with the people involved with it. Kim Hankel and a lot of the supporting actors and the, the productions, all those guys were great. But the studio, the people that owned it were still very paranoid about Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous because neither one of them have ever had any problems or issues discussing the movie at all. They're proud of it because it was a big role for them at the time in their careers. They don't have any shame associated with it whatsoever. But there's people around them that are like, oh, no, we don't want them to. And so the studio still had, it got so ridiculous that I couldn't include clips of Renee Zellweger in other people's featurettes.
Wow.
There's actually a shot in one of the actors' featurettes. He's talking about a scene he had in a car, and I needed to show the scene of him talking in the car. But the problem was Renee Zellweger was in the back seat. It was a nighttime shot. She's in the back seat and he's in the front with this other girl. I actually blackened out Renee Zellweger in the car so that you couldn't see her, so that I could use the clip of him saying the line I needed him to say. That's how ridiculous it got.
Is this the same studio that plastered their faces on the DVD box?
Yeah, I mean it's ridiculous. I mean there was just so that one was problematic because it caused a lot of problems and a lot of delays, and it just made the things you could say or not say were just really just like what so arbitrary. And I had some legal review problems with a couple projects where the legal department came in and said, we don't want anyone to say anything negative about the experience they had on this film at all. I was like, well, what do you mean by that? It's like, well, you have this part here where the guy came in and said he had a bad day because he was in a bad mood and he didn't really have a good day filming. We need you to cut that. I'm like, but so he just said he was in a bad mood. It was kind of a rough day for him. He didn't say, it's like, no, we don't want any of that in there. And so when you start dealing with shit like that, it's like, okay, fuck it. I'm not going to. So those are the ones that really kind of stick out to you. It's just like, God damn, it's like pulling teeth to get shit to work properly. But, then there's ones like Little Monsters, for example, where everything seemed to fall into place. Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, which I recently did, which was a delight. It was one of my favorite projects I've ever gotten to do. Maximum Overdrive from a few years ago. I got to do a lot of great stuff. I mean, there's just ones where there were the people involved and had such an affection for it that I got to talk to one person and say, oh, you should talk to this person. And then I talked to that person, oh, you should talk to these 3 people. And then suddenly it just branches off. And suddenly when you thought you were going to have 6 people, you have 14, 15 people. And it's great. So those are wonderful when they happen.
That Tales from the Dark Side release, I was so shocked at what all we were able to get.
Oh,
because I was positive it was just going to be, maybe a commentary, a couple little featurettes, but to get a feature length making of documentary.
Yeah. Well, I had a personal connection to that movie through George, but very much because of John Harrison, the director. Oh yeah, there you go.
It's one of my all-time favorites. Yeah. So I was very excited for that.
Yeah, John Harrison has been a great friend and a real supporter of years. And so to be able to do that one was very, very important to me. But it also ended up being that, again, everyone loved working on that movie. So I got a lot of great people, and it was just like, no, I think there's enough to do a doc here. And again, I didn't go into that thinking it was going to be a 110-minute long documentary. I just edited the thing, and it was like, oh, shit, this is longer than the movie. Yeah. And then, because I think the first rough cut came in at about 125 minutes, and then I was like, well, I can shape it down. I was like, no, this is what it needs to be. I don't go into it thinking, all right, this has to be 90 minutes or this has to be 80 minutes or whatever. It's just, it ends up being the length that where it feels like it plays the best. And if that's 60 minutes, great. If it's 90 minutes, great, whatever. But I'm very, very proud of the Tales from the Dark Side one. That one for me was just, it felt like it felt like I was working on Just Desserts again, the way that whole kind of came together. And it was just a very personal thing for me, that one.
Well, rightfully so. I mean, with Tales from the Dark Side being the spiritual successor to the Creepshow franchise, in this way, it's sort of the spiritual successor to Just Desserts.
Yeah, so. It was. Yeah, and so that was it. It was divided up in a very similar way, and it had a lot of the same people involved. So that there was, it was cool. It was. I was very, very happy with that one. That's one of my favorites in recent years. That's in the top 5 probably. I would think.
Who've been some of your favorite people to interview over the years?
Oh God, there's so many. George Romero was a good friend, and so he was always fun to interview. But George was just a great friend, so just hanging out with him and just shooting the shit was fun. Fred Decker from Night of the Creeps and Monster Squad, he's been great. John Harrison, who I mentioned. Robert Englund is always a delight to talk to because he just loves to talk, so he'll give you so much stuff. And Bruce is great too. Bruce often, because of the way his schedule works, I don't get a lot of time with Bruce. So, like, I did Sundown the Vampire Retreat several years ago, and I had a very brief window to grab him while he was out at a local university to do a screening of one of his movies. He said, I'm going to be able to come in, sit down for maybe 15 minutes, and then I got to get up and go. I'm like, okay, 15 minutes. Now you think 15 minutes, that's not really a lot of time. But Bruce is so good at interviews and knows exactly what to say and how to say it that you'll get more out of a 15-minute interview with him than you'll get out of an hour interview with somebody else. Right. So out of that 15 minutes, he actually ended up giving me I remember it was 14 minutes, and I used 13 of it.
Wow.
So it was like, so he's really, really good at that. So I never worry about, I'm only going to get 15 minutes with Bruce. That's enough. It'll work. And so he always makes time. He's always made time for me whenever I've asked him for stuff. And as you know, I go back to him quite a bit. Tom Savini is one of my best friends in the world. I love Tom Savini to death. I've interviewed him like 6 times, and he's always so much fun to talk to. God, who else? I mean, there's so many people that I've interviewed over the years that I just loved. It would be impossible for me to just kind of nail. But those are some of the ones that kind of come to mind off the top of my head. But I've done over 300 different Blu-ray and DVD projects in 15 years. So it's hard to. They blend together after a while. People will say, "Hey, I love what you did on the Prince of Darkness Blu-ray. I worked on that." If you think so, I never know when they're coming out. I just know when they're due. And then someone tells me, "Oh, it came out today." It did. Oh, okay. I don't know. It's. I mean, it sounds a little bit. It's kind of bragging because I have a lot of work, but at the end of the day, it ebbs and flows. But it does, especially after 15 years, it's hard to. Tom Savini says, "I'm great at remembering what I did. I just can't remember when I did it." And I'm like, I'm getting to be sort of the same way. I'm like, I know I did that. And it was either yesterday or 5 years ago. Or somewhere in between there, maybe. But so yeah, those are some of the people that come to mind off the top of my head. A lot of the genre greats that I've gotten to work with, albeit in a limited way, like Tobe Hooper, Wes Craven. They were really giving with their time and very supportive. And it's just like, I can't say enough about these people. I really can't.
Were there anybody that you've ever worked with that kind of surprised you with what maybe they brought, like whether it be an interesting story or maybe a fact that very few people knew?
Sure. There's always that's the fun, is when you get in there and they go, "Oh, I didn't know that." One of my early projects, which was one I still hold in very high regard, was Faces of Death, and which was a project I never had much respect for growing up. It just seemed like, oh, it's just a bunch of death footage cut together to shock people. It's like, and I saw it when I was a kid, and I didn't think it was very good, and I was like, eh. And then they came to me to work on that, and I went, oh, I'm more interested in the phenomenon around it than I am the actual making of it, because this is just a bunch of crap. But I wanted to go into it with as honest an approach as I could. But after talking with the editor and the special effects guys, I was like, wow, there's a lot more craft here than I ever gave it credit for, because like there's some real footage here, but it's bookended by fake stuff.
Yeah.
And the context of there's a scene in Faces of Death where you see a dog fight with these two dogs viciously fighting each other and tearing each other apart. And then the editor or the director said, well, by the way, none of that. Those dogs weren't fighting. They were playing around, and we just threw jam and shit on them and dubbed in horrible sounds later. Nothing happened. Nothing. I was like, wow. And then I got to do a commentary with the director of Faces of Death, who has never gone public with his real name, and he's kept it because he has another business that he didn't want affected by Faces of Death at all. And so I did a commentary with him, and it was the most fascinating commentary, because he would sit there and point out, oh yeah, this scene here where the dead guy washes up on the beach. Yeah, we just happened to be on the beach, and a call went out that a dead body turned up. So we just ran down the beach with the camera and filmed it. It's like, and so I think if you do a drinking game on that commentary, take a drink every time I go, oh really? And you'll probably die of alcohol poisoning about 10 minutes into the commentary, because it was fascinating. I was like, I had no idea. So I walked away from that project with a whole new respect for the craft that went into it. I still don't like watching the movie, but I was just like, no, this wasn't a slapdash production. There was a lot of effort put into this. This is really, really interesting. And then you hear stories like the one that came to mind, Texas Chainsaw 3D, which came out 5, 6, 7 years ago. I got the assignment to work on the stuff for that. A lot of that had been shot by people on the set, so it was mostly an editing job. But I said, I really want to do a commentary with the Chainsaw alumni that appear in that movie.
There you go.
Gunnar Hansen, Marilyn Burns, Bill Moseley, and John Dugan. I said, I want to get all four of these guys in a room together. I mean, they're only in the movie for like 3 minutes, maybe total each. But I just want all four of these guys in a room together for 90 minutes. I don't give a fuck what they talk about.
Yeah.
So as it turned out, while I was in production, they were all going to be at a convention in Atlanta together. So I was like, perfect. So I went down there and we got up there. It was on Saturday night and we recorded the commentary and it was a blast. We talked about the movie for maybe 15 minutes, but all the other stuff was just back and forth and they're all having a good time. I'm like, this is great. And at one point, John Dugan starts telling the story from the original Chainsaw about when, Grandpa gets her finger gets cut and he starts sucking her finger.
Yeah.
And he goes, Michael, I got to tell you, I was a young man. It was really hot in there and I was tired and I couldn't help myself. I'm sucking the finger of a pretty young girl and I got a little bit, and everyone, Gunnar and everybody went, oh my God, oh no. And John was trying to say, no, I'm not trying to be, no, I wasn't trying to brag or anything. I'm just saying it's just something that happened. I didn't want it to happen. And he kept trying to apologize for it. Everyone was laughing at him. Everyone took it in the spirit what she meant it, of course. And he was like, oh my God, I can't believe I told that story. Anyway, the next morning I go down to the convention floor before everything starts up. There were two big celebrity rooms. John was in one room, and I walk into that room and I see him. And before I can even say good morning, he walks up and goes, Michael, I really hope people don't take that story I told last night the wrong way because I don't, I don't want people to think I'm some dirty old man. I just thought it was funny that it happened and, people understood why it happened. I'm like, and I had to spend the next 5 minutes talking John Dugan down off the ledge about this thing because he's really concerned that it's not going to, it's like, John, everyone thought it was funny. They understood it. It was, so finally I get him to a point where, okay, great. I said there was nuance to the story, John. It was not just a bragging. It's going to come off just fine. Okay. Get done with John. I walk across to the other celebrity room. Bill Moseley's setting up. And I walk up to Bill and I go, hey, Bill, that was a lot of fun last night. Thanks for coming. And Bill goes, oh, yeah, that was a lot of fun. Boy, that was really something about that John Dugan boner story, wasn't it?
That's a pretty decent Bill Moseley, by the way.
And I just thought, well, so much for nuance, so much for context. It's the John Dugan boner story now. But yeah, I just that was really something about that John Dugan boner story. Oh, man. Okay. Well, so much. There you go. That's that.
John Dugan boner story.
Yeah. Oh, boy, yeah. When Bill gets excited, he really does sound a lot like Chop Top sometimes. He really does. Most of the time, he's as far from Chop Top as you could possibly be. But when he starts laughing, he's like, "Oh yeah. Oh, okay." It's like, but yeah, that was really something that John Dugan boner story, wasn't it? Oh man. Like, oh, okay. Well, so much for that. So sometimes those unexpected things can happen for sure.
Sorry.
Oh yeah. Oh, you better believe it.
I don't know how to follow that.
How do you follow a John Dugan?
Here's another story. Here's another little story about Bill, and it's not related to Bill at all. But there was this a friend of mine had dated this girl who had a tattoo of Bill Moseley on her back, a big one, a big tattoo of Bill Moseley on her back, and that he said he found. They eventually broke up, and he said it was through they're still friends, but it was. I got to be honest with you, it was a little bit strange sometimes having sex with her in a certain way because he would look down and there would be Bill Moseley going, hey. And it's like, oh, all right. This isn't working for me. So just like, because it was just him on the back with his yay. So all right. Oh, this isn't working for me.
Oh, Bill Moseley.
Yeah. I love Bill. Bill's another guy who I've worked with a bunch of times, and he's always there and tells great stories. He's great. He was one of the first people when I did Chainsaw 2. He was there for that, and I've done a couple others with him. He's great. He's just a really solid dude.
Yeah, he's somebody I really hope at some point in the future we can get him on. I'd love to just sit down and chat with that guy for a little bit.
Well, he's got some great stories, believe me, from a lot of projects. So yeah, he would be a good person to. There was one he told me, he got a job doing. He got offered this job to play a child molester and child killer once, and he was like, "Oh man, I don't know about this. I mean, I play a lot of these kind of guys, but this is even a little bit too rough even for me. I don't know about this." Because in the movie, he's like on trial for having murdered and killed this boy. And he says, "I don't know about this." And they said, "Well, here's what they're offering to play it." And he saw the number and he went, "Oh, bring on the boy." It's like, oh, okay. That changes things a little bit.
All of a sudden, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, suddenly I don't feel, as I'm an actor, I can act. God damn it. This isn't
That's
real.
all this is.
Yeah, this is just a job. But yeah, oh, bring on the boy.
Put that many zeros behind it. Why didn't you say?
Yeah, it's just like, well, goddamn, But,
So I was noticing recently, there's a lot of times there'll be a project that you worked on for maybe Scream Factory or something like that, and it'll show up on the Arrow UK edition. How's that handled between you and maybe Scream Factory or whoever?
Well, most of the time, the company that I do a lot of work for hire stuff, so stuff's controlled by whatever a company I do it for, and then if they decide to sell it or share it, that's up to them, and I don't see another dime. So that's great. So, but that's the deal I work. That's the deal. Then there are other times where I do control the rights on some of the stuff that I do, especially if it's for a foreign company and they can't offer me a lot of money. I'm like, okay, fine, you get to control it for your territory, but I control it for everywhere else.
Right.
So that helped me with Silver Bullet not long ago because I did a bunch of features for the Umbrella edition of that. Then Scream Factory got it, and I'm like, yeah, well, then guess what? You got to come to me for this stuff. And so that worked out well. So it's, so there's a handful of stuff that I control the rights on for other territories. But most of the time it's a work for hire thing. And sometimes that's fine. I don't expect a lot out of it after the fact. And sometimes these things have a limited life to begin with, so the fact I'm getting paid at all is fine,
Gotcha. Yeah, we were talking about this the other night. Kind of had a question. I don't know if you have any insight on, but Scream Factory puts out a lot of titles, and they kind of label them as collector's editions.
Mm-hmm.
Yet there are others that aren't under that label, but still have quite a few special features on them. Is there like a criteria that they fall under for that designation?
I'm not in the room when those decisions are made, so I couldn't tell you exactly what to, but I can say they go by what the film's reputation is, certainly.
Okay.
And say, well, this one will be worthy of a collector's edition. This one automatically, there's going to be, we think there's enough out there that's going to, determine this is a collector's edition. But then I did one for them called Brain Scan a couple of years ago, and they didn't label that as a collector's edition, and I got a shit ton of stuff for that. It was another one where I didn't expect to get all this stuff for it, and yet I ended up getting it. So they could have called it a collector's edition, but they didn't have, and I wouldn't have either necessarily thought it was going to be a collector's edition at the beginning. So it's kind of a roll of the dice. And then there's other times where they've said collector's edition all the way, and then for one reason or another, they weren't able to get a lot of people to pony up to the plate to do interviews and stuff. So you have a collector's edition that's kind of short. But but they have to make those decisions very early on because it goes into how they market it, getting new artwork done, the price point. There's a whole bunch of factors. So it's kind of a roll of the dice some of the times. A lot of times they know right off the bat they're going to get enough, and because they worked with the same people before. But then other times it's like, well, we think there should be enough here. Let's see if we can make that work. But as to exactly why they pick certain titles, you'd have to ask them. But that's kind of how I've viewed the process over the years in dealing with them in terms of why they pick certain things. So we think we can get enough to justify a special edition here. And it's a title that has the cachet to warrant it.
Right.
Yeah. So they just kind of have to decide what's worthy of the cardboard around it. That's
Pretty much. People are obsessed with O cards, man. There's a whole industry of people just selling O cards on eBay now. I'm thinking of just selling off my own O cards and retiring. It's just like people really put a lot of value in those things. But, hey, that's great. Whatever works for you. So whatever keeps you buying physical media.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
We'll get to that too. This question kind of goes along with that a little bit, I guess. Back in the Anchor Bay days, there were pretty unique releases out, like those Book of the Dead sets, and I know that Wicker Man wooden box was pretty unique, and the tins they put out. Why do you think that we don't see as much of that stuff anymore?
Money. It's because of we sold on that Book of the Dead. We made 100,000 of them. We sold through those, and then we sold probably another. We made more. I don't know how many we made. It was a limited edition, but our marketing manager always on that title always joked, it's limited in that it's limited to the amount of ones we can sell. And I'm like, okay.
It's a good limit.
Yeah, it's a good limit. So whatever that number ends up being. So I think a reason that you don't see a lot of elaborate packaging is that it's just a cost per unit analysis. They can maybe sell of a really great package, maybe 20,000 units if it's a really special thing, but then you got to break it down per unit. Is it going to make a cost? Is it going to drive the cost up to such a degree that you're not going to be able to sell those 20,000 units? Or is your margin going to be so pitiful you're only making maybe $1 or $2 on each package? And so the numbers just don't justify that kind of packaging very often anymore. Unless it's a super limited thing, they do 5,000 of and they charge a huge, outrageous amount of money for.
Right.
And usually you can find 5,000 people worldwide willing to pony up for something like that. But a lot of companies don't want to go through all that trouble because in the end, it still don't make a lot of money for it. So it's always, but yeah, it's a cost benefit. It really just comes down to a cost benefit analysis. Is it worth all the money and the time? And also there's a lot of production issues that come into play with stuff like that. I mean, it took us almost a year and a half to get the Book of the Dead going. From the time we put it into production to the time it came out was almost a year and a half of trying to figure out how are we going to do this thing back in a time where we didn't have internet communication and the ability to live stream videos and see what they were doing over in China. We just had to hope they figured out what they were doing. And then we would get a sample and go, well, that's wrong. Well, that one thing is right. All right, let's try again,
Yeah.
But in that year and a half time frame, 3 more editions of Evil Dead 2 were released.
No, that's not true. There were only 2.
You know what? I misspoke.
Here's the thing. I mean, we had a reputation for doing a lot of editions of some of these movies, and that's fair. Army of Darkness was always interesting to me. We only technically did 2 discs of that movie ever. There was the theatrical cut and the director's cut disc. They were all repackaging. So in one form or another, we just slapped a new package on one of those discs. We never did a third disc. It was either one of those 2 discs. Now, in terms of repackagings, we did lots.
And I bought all of them. So.
Army of Darkness in particular, because this happened a lot. We're up near the end of the year in the fourth quarter. We're coming up a little short. What can we put out there that we already have to try to get some more revenue in for the year? New version of Army of Darkness? All right. We'd send it out there and it would make a shit ton of money for us and make our year. And people would be like, why are you just doing this over and over again? It's like, look,
somebody's buying
it. It sells. Yeah. We're stupid if we don't do it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. If we put it out there and nobody buys it, trust me, we won't do it again. But that's what led to the Screwhead edition and the bootleg edition and the theatrical cut edition, all these different ones that we did because it was like people keep buying it. Yeah. Stop buying it, we'll stop making it, believe me. Because that's not how good business works. It's not like we were sitting there going, we just love having Army of Darkness out there. No, we loved having Army of Darkness out there because it made money.
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, so that was, but we did put on a shitload edition. Actually, the movie, if you had to guess, which movie did we put out the most different editions of during like the prime years of Anchor Bay? Which one do you think?
I would say Halloween, but
yeah, you are correct. Halloween was the one that we did the most different variants of, because we had the regular edition, the THX edition, the 30th anniversary edition, the extended edition from television, the double disc limited edition, the one with the mask in it, the one with the snow globe. I mean, we did. I mean, Halloween was the one that we really, but no one ever thinks of that one really. First of all,
I was gonna say, speaking of, I will never get rid of this Evil Dead Ultimate Edition that they put out. That is the definitive way in my eyes to own the features, at least.
Yeah, the feature that thing is fully loaded up. Yeah, it really is. I'm sorry, and they haven't released a lot of those features again on any of the other editions, which I don't know why that is.
They did a thing with Walmart where Walmart could release a DVD with the Blu-ray for a very short period of time.
Yeah, I remember.
I got in on that, but I've always hung on to this.
No, that one's that's a good one. That's a real good one. Yeah. We had Evil Dead. God, there's Evil Dead, Dawn of the Dead. There's so many of those ones we really pimped out big time. But you know what? I'm glad we did, because it allowed us, to do other ones as well.
I wish somebody'd get to re-pimping Dawn of the Dead.
Well, Second Sight's release is about to come out from. Yeah. And I did some stuff for that, actually. I edited the mall featurette that's in there.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah. And so, the main reason I did it is, one, it was for a friend of mine, David Gregory, who was producing all the features on that. He's a longtime friend. He asked me to do it. I was like, sure. And it's Dawn of the Dead. Of course, I'm going to want to do something with that. Main reason I did is just so I could get a copy of the fucking thing, because it's a huge set. I mean, this thing is big. So I'm gonna hopefully get a copy of that like in the next couple of weeks, so at least I'll have one.
Yeah, we've been pre-ordered since day one, and from what I understand, it's gonna be hard to get a hold of if you didn't do that. So
yeah, because it's technically not supposed to be available over here, but it's gonna find its way over here anyway, because that's the way it works. So yeah, and I would definitely get yours as quickly as you possibly can.
Yeah. Do you have any more on releases, Jonathan?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. So we're kind of running the final stretch here of questions. If you had to pick maybe your top 5 horror movies of all time, what would they be?
That I've worked on, or just in general?
Just in general.
Oh shit, I don't know. Because what scares you as an individual is so very different than what someone standing next to you would say. Dawn of the Dead, definitely. The original Dawn of the Dead is definitely on there. Creepshow is definitely on there for me. I would put the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, on there. And I would also include... God, that's hard. Blair Witch Project left a big impression on me.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
Because when I saw that, I was just so creeped out. For me, getting creeped out is sometimes better than being scared, because the scares go away because you learn to know when they're going to happen. But and so maybe the best one example of that is John Carpenter's The Thing. I'm consistently unnerved by that movie. Every time I watch it, I'm just like, I'm always looking around the corner, seeing is there something around that corner that I can't quite see? What's going on here? What is the atmosphere of that movie? It's like you could just cut it up and make it into a dessert and eat it. It's so good. So The Thing. I mean, all the usual candidates you would find for that. I think the original Candyman was really disturbing.
Yeah.
And then there's movies that are not necessarily horror, which I find, like Seven was one of the creepiest, most unsettling experiences I've ever had in the theater. When the scene where they go in and they find the desiccated guy on the bed.
Oh, yeah.
And you're thinking, well, that guy's clear. And I thought it was a dummy just lying there. I assumed it's like, this guy's been dead for a while. And then all of a sudden he sucks in that breath.
Yep.
And rises up. And then right after that scene's over, they cut to a really quiet scene in the hospital. And you could hear everybody, including myself, in the theater going, oh, God, Jesus Christ. Oh, fucking Jesus. And it was just like, wow. So, I mean, it's not technically a horror movie, but it's one of the scariest, creepiest, most unsettling films I've ever seen. And so there's a lot of films like that tend to fall outside the genre maybe a little bit, that I find ultimately to be the ones that I have real problems revisiting. But I'd have to sit, and it changes a lot. You ask me that question a week from now, and my answers might be completely different. But because there's horror that you have fun with, like Creepshow, Dawn of the Dead, and then there's other ones that really make, like Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer is a film I've only been able to watch once. I cannot watch that film again because of the home invasion scene. Because it's like, this is too real. This is exactly how something like this is.
Mhm.
And I don't want to experience that again. Requiem for a Dream, Darren Aronofsky's film about the drug addiction. I saw that in the theater here, the Maple Theater here, the Landmark Maple. I've never been back to that theater since. Because every time I drive by it, I'm like, oh God, Requiem for blah, blah, blah. Just for the last 20 minutes of that movie alone, where everything just goes straight to hell for all the characters, I'm just like, oh God, I can't even go in that theater. I can't fucking go. So there's a lot of contenders for the ones that the movies that fuck you up the most.
Yeah. What's a movie that you love that may surprise people?
Joe versus the Volcano with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. I think it's criminally underappreciated, misunderstood.
So much better than You Got Mail. I mean,
it's the best of their three collaborations, and I think Sleepless in Seattle is a terrific movie. Joe versus the Volcano for me it was marketed as sort of a sweet fairy tale romance, and I'm like, well, it's a fable, but it's a dark comedy. It's got a lot of great dialogue, the characters I can relate to very well, and it was a movie where I didn't know how it was going to go. I was like, I've not seen this movie before. This is really different, and I love the tone and the wistful fairy tale aspect of it. That it doesn't lean too much into the romance, and then it gets off of that, and the performances and the visual style. I mean, everything about that movie for me is, boy, this didn't get a fair shake when it came out at all. And so I've always been a huge proponent of that movie since day one, and I wish that it had. It made me feel good. I don't know if it was Rolling Stone or Entertainment Weekly or one of those magazines recently did all of Tom Hanks's movies rated from the best to the worst, and I read it from the worst up to the first because I'm nervous. I'm like, where are they going to put Joe versus the Volcano? And I think Joe versus the Volcano was in their top 10.
Oh,
and I was like, fucking A. Personally, I would put it near 1 or 2, but having it in the top 10 for me was like, good. Someone's paying attention out there. So I felt really good about that.
Nice. So we're seeing, rapid changes in the media sections at the physical stores, Best Buys, Walmarts, other places.
Yeah.
Where do you see physical media headed in the next 5 years?
I'm going to preface this by saying that anyone who can tell you where physical media is going to be a year from now is talking out their ass.
Right.
No one knows. I've been seeing the same article republished every year for the last 20 years. This is it for physical media. It's on the decline. It's over. It's done with. It's gone. It's history. And then it keeps going on. What I think we're going to see is it will continue to sort of boil down and to be very much it'll be a collector's market thing.
Right.
Much of the way that vinyl is to some degree, or the way Laserdisc was, where the people who want the high-end experience are going to buy it. The collectors, the people who want to own the movie, that segment's never going away. I don't think it's ever going to go away.
Yeah.
As far as being able to buy the stuff physically in stores, those days are pretty much over. I mean, you can't. First of all, who goes to a physical store these days anyway? And second of all, they stopped carrying that stuff years ago. Best Buy is a fucking dead zone for buying this. It used to be the best place in the world to go, but now you go there, it's like there's nothing there. So it's Amazon. It's sites like Diabolic DVD where you can really get your movie on from places like that. And I think that's where the future is going to be. It's all, you can buy it online, but people are going to still buy movies, and they're still going to buy cult movies, and they're still going to buy horror films and want to have them in their collection. It's just it won't be maybe as many people, and the movies might cost a little more, but they're still going to be there. I don't see it ever really going away. It's just going to kind of crystallize and kind of hone down to the dedicated people who will then pass that on to their kids and so forth and so on. Because a lot of the people who are buying the movies today weren't even born when I was 20 years ago. Yeah. So clearly it's not just one generation that's eventually going to die off and then there won't be anybody buying movies anymore. No, it keeps renewing itself. So that's what I think is going to happen. Who knows? I don't know. But I've seen the death of physical media proclaimed so many times. It's like, yeah. What else is new? You know?
Right.
I certainly hope it's not.
No, I don't. I really don't think it is, because, and I think people are starting to figure this out because they buy all these things on streaming or they buy it on Amazon, and then all of a sudden, because of a legal thing and a catalog shift, suddenly all these titles disappear that they thought they owned.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you don't own this. You just had a long-term lease on it until we said you don't own it anymore. And now some people are like, I'm like, meanwhile, I'm looking at my shelf going, can't take this shit from me.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, so,
Walmart's never come in my house and took a movie back.
No. So. And if they tried that, they wouldn't make it off this property alive.
Yeah.
And I got a big backyard. I've buried several people out there. I'll bury another one. I don't give a shit. It doesn't cost much for a shovel and some plastic sheeting from Home Depot. It really doesn't. So it's a cost I'm willing to bear to keep people out of from taking my shit.
So my final question for you is, are there any new paths you would like to take Red Shirt Pictures down in the future that beyond what you're doing now?
Oh, yeah. I've been wanting to start getting into making my own movies and start to also, there'll be an announcement soon. I am going to have my own label soon. I'm going to have Red Shirt Home Video, which will have some of my documentary work that I've done that'll be available on its own in new versions that you maybe haven't seen before, and maybe even acquire some films for it. I don't know. It's something that will be exclusive to a particular retailer. So it's an arrangement I'm making with them, but there'll be an announcement of that probably sometime right after Christmas. Because right now all anyone's talking about is Friday the 13th and Dawn of the Dead. So I just want to let that whole season go by, and then for next year we'll have at least 2 or 3 releases from my label out there, and so that'll be nice. And there'll only be limited time releases. There won't be, the first one's only going to be like 1,000 pieces, and that's it. So if you don't get it, that's it. And then other ones will be more or less depending on what the title is. But that's something I'm moving into, because I've been discovering that I can't make a living working for other people delivering full-length documentaries for, a certain amount of money. And then I realized if I'd released this by myself, I could have made 5-6 times that amount. Right. So it's like, why am I giving it away, really? I mean, I've had great relationships with people, and I'm very happy to have done the work I have, but I still need to pay my rent, Yeah. So that was another motivator. And also I have more control that way too, which is also a good thing.
Right.
Fantastic. That's great news.
Yeah. So instead of the little boat on the spine, you'll have a little red T there on the spine. So maybe that'll become the mark of quality. We'll see what happens.
I do want to point out that if there is not a slipcase on these releases, there's a missed opportunity.
They will all have O cards on them. They will all have.
Boom.
Yes, mostly because apparently that's all anyone gives a shit about anymore. O cards. So
they don't. Yeah.
So I may not even put a movie in there. Yeah, but it's. So no, they'll all have O cards on them. So I can say that for certain right now. So slipcase. Michael Slipcase Felsher couldn't do one without a slipcase on it.
Oh no, there'd be riots in the streets.
There'd be riots in the streets, and my house would be burned down, and I would just be left sad and lonely, lying on the street, going, "Why didn't I just do a slipcase?"
Yeah, it wouldn't be people just sending you milkshakes to your house every 5 minutes.
I know that became a thing there, didn't it? I don't drink milkshakes anymore because it's just like I had so many of that, and I was like, oh.
I kind of tuned in. I was just watching, and then I stayed for how many milkshakes were going to end up during that stream.
Oh, it was quite a few. Well, this group of guys I play with online pretty much every night. They on my birthday 2 years ago, they sent me 4 milkshakes that day, and then this year they sent me like 6. So. I'm gonna next year. I think I'm gonna try to be out of town, so I don't get, because after a while it's just like I can't drink any more milkshakes, man.
Did somebody end up actually sending you a pizza? I can't remember.
Yes, they did. Yeah, I did. I got a really nice couple pepperoni pizzas from Jet's Pizza that were delivered, which I really needed because I was hungry by that time that auction was over. So yeah, I think from now on, if I'm ever hungry and I don't have any money, I'll just go online saying, "Send me some stuff." I could use some Chinese food or some Benihanas if anybody's got a Benihanas out there.
All you gotta do is promise to auction some stuff off later.
Yeah, I mean, apparently that's the way it works. I didn't know that was the equation, but apparently it is. So good for me.
We gonna see any more of those soon?
Maybe I don't have a lot of stuff right now, so that's kind of the reason I haven't done anything. But there is a possibility of one coming up, hopefully before the end of the year. But I'm waiting to see if I'll have enough material to pull it off with, though. So hopefully there'll be one more.
That cast photo of the Texas Chainsaw basically signed by everyone.
Yeah,
that was.
How much did that sell for? Like 500, something like that?
I think so, and it went on for a while. I mean, there's a couple guys really just battling it out.
Well, yeah,
I hopped out at like 200. I was like, I can't.
Yeah, I mean that would, but I knew that one would go for a lot because I mean, 90% of the people that were on are gone now.
Yeah, I mean,
so it's like, yeah, especially having Jim Sedow on there because back then they didn't find that many pieces with him. So that was yeah, that had every single buddy from every single cast member was on that one. That was a nice little thing. So yeah, that was a good one. That was definitely I figured that would be the big one of the night. I didn't realize by how much it was going to be. So nice. I remember when I shipped that out, I like double wrapped it and shoved it in a box, and then put that box in another box. It's like, because God help me if anything happens to this, I do not have the money to replace it. So, I made sure that it was a box that even if Ace Ventura was delivering it, it would still get there okay. It was. I was very careful with that one, because sometimes people get, you buy something on auction and they'll, oh, this very nice dainty crystal sculpture, I'll shove it in an envelope and just set it out, and you get it and you're like, what the fuck,
Amazon's good about doing that.
Yeah, they're great, aren't they? They're really great. It was weird though. They'll do like Amazon. I ordered this little cable tubing to hide a wire in my house. It's only about 3 foot long, and it's about that thing around. And it's like this long. They put it in a box that you could have put 8 baseball bats in.
Yep.
And I'm like, what the fuck? Why would you do this? This is complete. What a waste. I mean, it was just, man, I was just like, all right, fine, free big box, I guess. But I was just like, I think you could have found a smaller box to put this in, or just shipped it by itself. That's like when they ship packing material in a big box. I'm like, it's packing material. What are you doing?
We don't want it to be harmed.
Yeah, oh yeah, but what do you pack the packing material with? Packing material? Stupid.
And that's the stuff that keeps me up at night.
So. I know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, I just want to thank you for all you do for us horror fans, and the projects you work on, and thank you for being on with us.
Oh, sure. No, I was happy to do it, and if you ever want me on again for any reason, happy to do it. It's nice to be able to talk to people who appreciate what you do, and let them know that I'm trying my best. Whatever, I always feel like every time I get a project, it's another up at bat, and it's an opportunity to really, tell some interesting stories and really document the process of making that particular movie. And I never take it for granted. And it's been a real privilege and an honor to have done this for the last 15 years. So, to everyone out there still buying these things and supporting the work that I and other people like me do, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I also could use a pizza. I would like pepperoni and sausage, and you know what? A little bit of bacon. Fuck it. Why not? That sounds like fun.
There you go. Send it his way, folks.
Yeah.
And a bacon milkshake.
Yeah. No. No.
All right, skip that part.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you again, sir.
All right, man. You're welcome.